The sky of Zalvaron was burning red. The ground shook under the sound of explosions. Smoke covered the air, and the screams of warriors echoed in the distance. Nixara stood on top of the cliff, her silver armor shining with dust and blood. She was the youngest commander in the Zalvaron army, brave, smart, and loyal. Her long purple hair flew in the wind as she looked down at the battlefield. This was not just another war. This was a trap, and she was starting to feel it. Her team waited behind her, ready for her command. "Move forward," she ordered. "Crush the enemy before they reach the hill." The soldiers followed without question. They trusted Nixara, and she had never failed them before. But something was wrong today. She noticed the other Zalvaron units were not moving. No backup, no communication, only silence. She called through her comm device. "Commander Vex, where is the second squad?" No answer again. She tried. "Do you copy?" Still silence. Then, from the shadows came the attack. Enemy machines burst out from underground, firing plasma shots. Nixara fought like a storm, her twin blades cutting through metal and flame. But it was too many, too fast, too sudden. Her squad fell one by one, ambushed and alone. "Why is no one helping?" She shouted, slashing another machine. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from betrayal. She turned around and saw them, Zalvaron soldiers, watching from the high rocks. Her own people, just standing there. Then one of them raised a blaster and fired at her leg. Nixara screamed in pain as she fell to her knees. The battlefield faded in the background. Commander Vex stepped out, face cold, no regret. "You were too strong, too loyal," he said calmly. "The Council fears that." Nixara's eyes burned with anger. "I fought for you. I bled for Zalvaron." "You were never one of us," Vex replied. "Your strength made you dangerous." Then he lifted his weapon again, aimed at her chest, but before he could shoot, a machine exploded nearby, shaking the ground. The cliff cracked under her feet, and Nixara fell, her body tumbling into the dark canyon below. She hit rock, then water, then nothing. Her body floated, broken, cold, and forgotten. Blood from her wounds painted the river red. She was dying, alone, betrayed by her own people. Darkness began to take her. Her mind whispered, "This is the end." But then, through her half-closed eyes, she saw a strange light, a ship unlike anything from Zalvaron. It hovered above the river, its light scanning the area. A figure came out, wearing human armor, tall, careful, and alert. He moved toward her slowly, weapon ready. He didn't know if she was a threat or just another alien corpse. Then he saw her chest rising and falling. She was alive, barely. He lowered his weapon and ran to her side. Nixara tried to speak, but only blood came from her mouth. The man knelt down, checked her pulse. "Hang on," he said in a deep voice. "You're not dying today." She blacked out before she could see his face, but she felt his arms lifting her gently. Warmth touched her skin for the first time since the battle began. He carried her back into the ship. The doors closed behind them, and the engines roared. The ship rose into the sky, away from the burning battlefield, away from the betrayal, the lies, the war, inside the ship. He placed her on a medical bed. Machines started scanning her body. He looked at her strange alien face, the wounds, the scars. He didn't know who she was or what she had done, but something inside him said she deserved to be saved. As the ship flew into deep space, Nixara slept in silence, her body weak, but her heart still burning. She had been betrayed, left for dead, but fate was not finished with her yet. Her story was only beginning, and the one who saved her, Jackson, Wade, was about to change everything. Nixara opened her eyes slowly. The light above her was soft, not like the harsh lights of Zalvaron warships. She tried to move, but her body screamed in pain. Her arms were wrapped in clean bandages. Her chest was covered with healing gel. The room around her was small and quiet, made of metal, old, but safe. There were wires, blinking lights, and strange earth symbols on the walls. She wasn't on her planet anymore. A shadow moved near the door. She turned her head and saw a man standing there. Tall, broad shoulders, unshaved face, dark eyes. He held a steaming cup in one hand and a scanner in the other. Their eyes met her cold. His calm, "You're awake," he said simply, his voice deep and a little tired. Nixara didn't reply. She just stared, trying to guess if he was friend or enemy. "I found you near the river," he said. "Didn't expect anyone alive down there." She looked away, her throat dry. He walked closer and placed a water bottle near her hand. "Easy," he said. "You lost a lot of blood." Nixara reached out slowly, her fingers shaking. Water was warm and tasted strange, but it gave her strength. She sat up a little, ignoring the pain. Her body was covered in scars and bruises. Her leg tightly wrapped. "You're human," she said at last, her voice cracked. He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. Last I checked." Nixara studied his armor, his tools, his ship. This man was not military. His ship was old, patched from many battles. A lone traveler, maybe an ex-soldier, maybe something else. She pulled the blanket closer around her. "Why did you save me?" she asked. He shrugged. "You were breathing. That's it." "That's enough," he said, and walked back to the control panel. Nixara watched him in silence. He wasn't afraid of her, but he wasn't warm either. She could tell he had seen war, loss, maybe betrayal too. His ship flew quietly through space, no signs of destination. She didn't know where they were going. But for now, she was alive, and that surprised her more than anything else. For a moment, she considered attacking him, taking control of the ship. But her body wouldn't move fast enough, and deep inside, she wasn't sure she wanted to hurt him. She remembered the cold eyes of Commander Vex, the betrayal, the pain, this human. He was different. Later, she tried to stand and fell. He caught her before she hit the floor. "You're stubborn," he said, lifting her easily. "I'm a warrior," she replied. "You're a patient now," he muttered, placing her back. On the bed, for the first time, Nixara smiled, just a little in the next few hours. They spoke very little. She asked questions, he gave short answers. His name was Jackson Wade, a former soldier from Earth. He didn't talk much about his past, but his eyes told stories full of fire and ghosts. He now traveled alone, helping when he could, fixing broken things. She asked why he came to Zalvaron space. He said, looking for parts, but she felt there was more. When he left the room, Nixara tried to stand again. This time she moved to the corner of the room and found a blade hidden in her boot. She held it tight, breathing slowly. Old habits don't die, even after betrayal. She thought of killing him, escaping, but something held her back. He had saved her, without asking who she was. That kind of kindness was rare in any galaxy later. She watched him from the shadows of the doorway. He was working on the ship engine, singing softly to himself. It was a strange human song, soft and full of pain. She didn't understand the words, but the feeling was clear. She saw something in him that she didn't expect: loneliness. It felt familiar, like a mirror. That night, she lay awake, staring at the roof of the ship. She wasn't sure what she was now, not a warrior, not a leader, just a wounded alien on a human ship. But something inside her whispered, a quiet voice she hadn't heard in years. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe her story was not over yet. And maybe, just maybe, the human stranger was not a stranger at all, just the first page of something new. Jackson stared at the blinking control screen. The ship's energy core was getting weaker. They had only a few hours of smooth flight left. He glanced at the sleeping alien girl resting in the medical bay. Her breathing was steady now, but her body was still weak. Even so, she healed faster than any human he'd ever seen. She had barely spoken in the last day, but her eyes never stopped watching him, silent, sharp, guarded like a wild animal trapped in a cage. He didn't blame her. He didn't ask questions either. Everyone out here had a story, most of them painful, most of them heavy. A red light flashed on the screen. Something was tracking them. He cursed under his breath and pulled up the radar feed. Unknown signals, fast moving. closing in from behind, too many for comfort. He hit the ship's come. "Wake up," Nixara was already on her feet, knife in hand. Her eyes met his, and without a word, she walked to the cockpit. "What is it?" she asked. "Friends of yours?" he said dryly. She looked at the screen and froze. "I know those signals," she whispered. "They're not friends." The ship rocked suddenly as something exploded nearby. Energy blasts lit up the black space outside. "They found me," she said through clenched teeth. "Who?" Jackson asked, pushing the controls harder. "My people," she replied. "They want me dead." Jackson didn't ask why, not now. He pulled the ship into a steep dive, heading toward a nearby moon. It was covered in dust and shadows, cold, and full of caves. "If they follow us down there, we'll lose them," he said. Nixara nodded, gripping the wall for balance. "Good," she said. "Let them come." The ship landed hard, kicking up dust and sand. They jumped out quickly, grabbing weapons and supplies. "Can you fight?" Jackson asked. Nixara gave him a look that needed no answer. Even injured, she moved like a predator, fast, focused, deadly. They ran into the shadows of the rocks. Above them, enemy ships circled like vultures. Machines dropped from the sky black, spider-like hunters with red glowing eyes. "They sent the stalkers," Nixara said coldly. "Great," Jackson replied. "I hate stalkers." The creatures moved fast, silent, scanning for heat and movement. Jackson and Nixara hid behind a large boulder, breathing quietly. One of the machines crept past them. Jackson's hand moved toward his blaster. Nixara stopped him, shaking her head. She pulled a small metal spike from her belt. In one motion, she jumped, landed on the machine, and drove the spike into its core. The machine dropped, twitching and sparking. Jackson stared, impressed. "Okay," he whispered. "Remind me not to make you angry." They moved quickly from rock to rock, avoiding detection. But the machines were too many. They had to fight, again and again, side by side. Jackson with his blaster and tricks, Nixara with her blades and speed. Their bodies moved like they had trained together for years, each protecting the other without a word. After the last machine fell, the night became quiet. They hid inside a dark cave, setting up a small fire. Jackson sat with his back against the wall, wiping blood from his arm. Nixara sat across from him, sharpening her blade. He looked at her through the flames. "You're not just a soldier," he said. "You're something else." Nixara didn't answer at first. Then she looked up, her voice low. "I was a commander," she said. "Betrayed by my own people." Jackson didn't press further. He just nodded. "I figured," he said. "The way they wanted you dead." It had to be personal. She studied him for a moment, then asked, "Why did you help me?" "You didn't even know me." Jackson threw a small rock into the fire. "Because I've been left behind too," he said. "And I know what it feels like to wish someone had come back for you." Nixara didn't reply, but her eyes softened for the first time. The fire cracked between them, two warriors from different worlds, both wounded by the same pain. Outside, the night wind howled, but the cave was warm, not just from the fire, but from the silence they shared. Not cold anymore, not strangers anymore. They were still running, still hunted. But something had changed, not in the stars above, but in the space between them. Trust, quiet and unexpected, had taken its first breath. Hours passed since the battle on the moon. The fire had burned low, leaving only soft orange light dancing across the cave walls. Jackson sat in silence, turning a small piece of metal between his fingers. Nixara watched him from the other side of the cave. She hadn't slept, not because of the wounds, but because of the weight in her chest. She had survived blades, betrayals, and machines, but truth was something else. Truth had its own kind of sharp edge. Outside, the wind howled again. Like a ghost that had lost its voice, Jackson finally broke the silence. "You should rest." Nixara shook her head. "Rest doesn't fix what's broken." He looked up, his eyes steady. "Then talk," he said. "Tell me who you really R. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she slowly pulled off the upper part of her armor, revealing the mark on her shoulder. A symbol etched into her skin, the high crest of Zalvaron Command. Jackson stared at it, then leaned back against the wall. "Well," he said softly. "Didn't expect that." "I was born in the warrior domes," she said, her voice quiet. "Trained since childhood. Raised for war." She didn't look at him as she spoke. "My people believe in strength above all. No mercy, no weakness. I rose fast, faster than they liked." Jackson listened, saying nothing. "The council feared me," she continued. "They thought I'd become something they couldn't control. So they turned my own soldiers against me. Set me up, left me to die." She finally met his eyes. "I should be dead," she whispered. "But you pulled me out of that river." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "So you were their rising star," he said. "Now you're a ghost they want buried." Nixara gave a hollow laugh. "That's one way to say it." He looked at the dying fire, then back at her. "I fought in Earth's last war," he said, his tone low and steady. "I believed in orders, in the cause, in honor. But near the end, I saw things. Orders that made no sense, lives wasted for pride. They gave me medals, then buried my friends." There was a long pause. "I walked away," he added. "Didn't look back." Nixara leaned forward, her voice softer than before. "You understand," she said, not as a question. "I do," he replied. "More than I wish I did." A quiet moment passed between them, no noise, no movement. Just two soldiers breathing the same air, carrying the same invisible weight. Nixara reached out and handed him her blade. Jackson blinked in surprise. "What's this?" "A weapon," she said, "but also trust. You saved my life," she added. "If I lose control, you'll know what to do." He stared at the blade, then placed it beside her gently. "I'm not letting you die again," he said. "Once was enough." She looked at him, truly looked at him. His face was scarred, his eyes tired, but his soul was still alive. Not many warriors had that left. "Your name," she asked. "What does it mean? Jackson?" He said, smiling slightly. "Means nothing special. Just a man who didn't know when to quit." She smiled, "For real this time. It suits you." The wind outside softened. Like the world had heard their pain and offered silence. Jackson stood and walked toward the cave entrance, looking up at the stars. "Your people will come again," he said. "They won't stop until you're gone." "I know," she said behind him, "but I'm done running." He turned to her slowly. "What will you do?" "I'll go back," she said, standing tall. "But not to join them. To burn down the lies they built." Jackson didn't speak, but his eyes held something new: respect, maybe even pride, and for the first time since the cliff, Nixara felt something rise inside her again. Not anger, not hate, but purpose. She had someone who saw her, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a person, and that changed everything. Their fates were now linked, two warriors with broken pasts, standing in the ashes of their old lives, together. They would fight not for revenge, but for something cleaner, for truth, for freedom, for the right to choose who they wanted to be. And deep inside, where words didn't reach, a quiet bond was growing, not yet love, but not far from it either. The stars looked colder now. Jackson stood on the ship's wing, fixing a loose panel while Nixara stared at the night sky. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. Something had changed since the cave. The silence between them had become something else, something warmer, something heavier. She had decided to return, not for vengeance, but for truth. But truth was not cheap. It would come with fire, blood, and maybe the end of everything she still cared about. Jackson climbed down and wiped his hands on a torn cloth. "We're patched up," he said, "but this ship won't survive another ambush." Nixara nodded, her thoughts already ahead. "I know a place," she said. "A hidden outpost where not everyone follows the council." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "You trust them?" "No," she replied, "but I know how to make them listen." They left the dead moon behind, its surface still scarred with battle. The stars stretched ahead like ancient witnesses. Jackson piloted the ship quietly while Nixara stared at her own reflection in the window. The person looking back was not the same warrior who fell from the cliff. She was harder now, and yet something inside her was softer too. The outpost floated above a shattered moon, hidden behind asteroid fields, rusty ships, patched buildings, and hungry faces. These were the forgotten, the betrayed, the rebels, and among them, a few still remembered Nixara's name when she stepped. Off the ship, silence followed, then whispers, then stares. Some bowed, some stepped away. Unsure if she was real or a ghost, Jackson stayed close, one hand on his blaster, just in case. A woman stepped out from the shadows, her face lined with old scars. "Nixara," she said, voice calm. "I thought you were dead." "I was," Nixara answered, "but not anymore." Jackson watched them closely, noticing the weapons hidden under jackets. This was not a safe place, but it was the only place that still had hope, inside a dim room filled with maps and dust. Nixara laid out her plan. "I need fighters," she said. "I need a team that wants the council gone as much as I do." The scarred woman folded her arms. "And what do we get in return?" "A chance," Nixara said, "to stop living in the shadows." It wasn't a speech, it wasn't even a promise. It was just truth, plain and raw, and sometimes truth is enough. By the next sunrise, a plan had been drawn. Jackson studied the blueprints of the Zalvaron command station, heavy defenses, 2 shield layers, rotating patrols. "It's suicide," he said without looking up. Nixara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Only if we fail." He turned to her, searching her face for doubt. There was none. Only fire, only purpose. Training began at once. Nixara led the drills like the commander she once was. Jackson taught them how to think like humans, unpredictable, fast, wild. They fought in empty rooms, raced through narrow tunnels, and learned to trust each other. Bit by bit, the broken began to believe again, but the council had eyes, and they saw what was growing. Commander Vex, now seated in power, watched the reports with a cold smile. "She's still alive," he whispered. "And worse, she's inspiring them." He sent a message to his elite assassins. Find her, end her, and burn everything she touched. The outpost didn't see them coming, a silent attack before dawn, shadows slipping through vents and walls. Explosions shook the ground. Screams echoed across the corridors. Jackson and Nixara woke to chaos, grabbing weapons without a word. They moved like one body, protecting the weak, pushing back the invaders. In the smoke, Nixara spotted a familiar face, one of her old squadmates. He hesitated, recognition flickering in his eyes. Then he raised his blade. She blocked the strike, her own blade flashing like lightning. "No more lies," she hissed. Their fight was brutal, fast, personal. Memories crashed between every blow, laughter in the training halls, missions on alien worlds, and then the betrayal, the fall, the silence. Nixara disarmed him and held the blade to his throat. He looked up at her, afraid for the first time. "You should have stayed dead," he spat. "I did," she said. "But someone saved me." Jackson found her moments later, covered in ash and blood. He didn't ask what happened, he just stood beside her as the remaining rebels gathered around. Half the outpost was gone, but those who remained stood taller. Fire behind their eyes, weapons in their hands. Nixara looked at them, then at Jackson. "This wasn't the end," she said. "It was the test." He nodded once. "Then let's pass the next one." They had been hunted, hurt, and almost erased. But now they were ready. The next time they faced the council, it wouldn't be from the shadows, it would be at the gates, with fire in their hearts and truth on their side. And this time she wouldn't be falling, she would be rising. The stars were quiet the night before the storm. Nixara stood alone on the edge of the rebel ship, watching the broken moonlight reflect on her blade. Below them, in the dark of space, waited the Zalvaron command station, cold, armored, proud. The same place where she had once taken orders. The same place where they had tried to erase her name. Jackson joined her, holding 2 cups of warm drink. She took one without looking. "I used to think it was unshackable," she said. "That place down there." Jackson sipped his cup. "Everything breaks eventually." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "I'm not just breaking it," she whispered. "I'm going to make them feel everything they buried." They met the team inside the strategy room. Maps were glowing, targets marked in red. Everyone was listening. Even the old warriors who once doubted her. She stood without armor, without rank, just truth. "They built their power on fear," she said. "Let them see what courage looks like." The plan was simple. 2 entry points, one inside the shield ring, the other through the waste ducts. Jackson would lead the first wave, clearing the path. Nixara would go straight to the heart to face Commander Vex, the man who had once called her a sister in arms. The ship dropped out of stealth near the command station. Sirens lit up, alarms screamed. Fighters launched into the black sky. But this time, the rebels were ready. They moved like fire through metal halls, no hesitation, no fear. Jackson moved with speed and rage, blasting through doors. Leading the charge, every step forward was carved with purpose. Nixara's path was slower, colder. She walked through old corridors where she used to train. Her fingers touched the wall where her name had once been etched. It had been scratched out, erased like dust. But dust still remembers. And tonight, it would return with fire. She passed 2 guards, her old friends. They dropped their weapons. When they saw her, she said nothing, only kept walking. They let her pass. Heads lowered in shame. Some wounds didn't bleed, but they cut deeper. The doors to the command hall opened with a long hiss. Vex stood at the center. His armor new, his face older. He smiled without joy. "I should have burned your body when I had the chance," he said. Nixara stepped forward, blade in hand. "You did burn something," she replied. "But it wasn't me, it was your honor." They circled each other like wolves. Their blades met in a flash of sparks. Metal singing against metal. Vex was strong, still fast. But Nixara was no longer the girl who followed his orders. She had fallen, been saved, been rebuilt. Their fight echoed through the walls of the station. Rebels and soldiers stopped for a moment, listening to the storm in the heart of command. It was not just a duel, it was a trial, and every slash spoke of years of silence, betrayal and fire. Vex struck deep. Her side burned with pain, but she didn't fall. She caught his blade, twisted, turned, and disarmed him in one motion. She held her blade to his chest, breathing hard. He looked up at her, no longer a commander, only a man. "You wouldn't," he said, voice shaking. "I don't need to," she replied, and stepped back. Jackson entered the room as the alarms fell silent. The rebels had won. The station was no longer a symbol of control. It was proof that the weak could rise. He looked at Nixara, bleeding but unbroken. She nodded once. "It's over." "No," Jackson said, walking beside her. "It's just begun." The Zalvaran flag was taken down, the halls repainted with the colors of freedom. The soldiers who once followed Vex now stood beside Nixara, not out of fear, but because they saw what true strength looked like. She never asked to lead, but some fires burned too bright to hide. And now, across space, her name was spoken not with fear, but with hope. She wasn't just the warrior who survived. She was the stone they never saw coming, and beside her, always ready, always steady, was the human who refused to give up on her. The station was quiet now. No alarms, no gunfire, no orders shouted through metal walls. Just silence, the kind that follows after a storm. Nixara stood at the highest deck, looking out through the large glass wall. Stars drifted peacefully across the black ocean of space. For the first time in years, they didn't feel cold. Below her, workers cleaned the ruins. Old symbols were taken down, broken statues removed. A new flag, no empire, no council. Just a symbol of peace was being raised by hands that once carried weapons. She should have felt victorious. But what she felt was something quieter, not triumph, not glory, just breath, just being. something she hadn't felt since she was a child. Jackson leaned against the rail behind her, watching her in silence. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She turned slowly, her body still aching from battle, but her eyes were steady, full of life. "You stayed," she said, voice low. "I said I would," he replied. His arms crossed. She stepped closer, every step unsure and certain at the same time. "You could leave now," she said. "You've done more than anyone ever has." Jackson shrugged. "I could," he said, "but I don't want to." There was no music, no dramatic moment. Just two people, standing in the quiet of what they had survived. Their eyes met, and in that silence, something passed between them. Not just respect, not just trust. It was something softer, something that had waited patiently beneath the fire and metal. A bond not forged in peace, but in war, in pain, in choice. Nixara stepped to the window again, looking down at her people. "They need a leader," she said. "You are one," Jackson replied. She nodded slowly. "I never wanted to be," she whispered. "Exactly why you should be," he said, outside. The stars kept moving, a symbol of how things change, slowly but always behind them. The hall filled with the quiet sound of rebuilding, new voices, new footsteps, a future being shaped one decision at a time. Nixara turned to Jackson, a small smile rising. "Will you help me build this place?" He smiled back, not with charm, but with calm. "I'm better with broken things," he said. "So yeah, I'm staying." She walked to him, stood close enough to hear his breath. "You saved me," she said, "when I was nothing but blood and regret. And you brought me back," he said, "when I had nothing left to fight for." There were no kisses, no grand words, just two hands reaching for each other and holding on down below. Children played where soldiers once marched, voices laughed in places where screams had echoed. The past was still there, but it was no longer in control. It had become a scar, not a chain, and in the stars above, stories began to travel. Stories of a warrior girl left to die, who rose again, of a human who chose kindness over war, of two broken hearts that healed side by side. She was no longer just Nixara the Blade. He was no longer just Jackson the survivor. They were something new now, not heroes, not myths, just two people who refused to give up, and together, they gave the galaxy something rare, a reason to believe again.